Hello everyone at the Secrets to Sleep Baby and Toddler Sleep Help Group. My name is Courtney. I am your host. I help families get a really great night of sleep. Today we are going to talk about gentle sleep training. I called this the what, why, and the how live today, okay? So we'll go into what is gentle sleep training? Why would we do it? And then how do we go about it, okay? So if you're watching live, please be posting, please be commenting. Feel free to ask your questions. Let me know anything that goes on in your mind, and I will answer it live so that you have that answer, okay? Let's get right into it. So what is gentle sleep training? Okay, so the main point of this is okay, what is sleep training? Okay, we all have an idea of sleep training and what that is in our heads. If you want to watch the live that I did about sleep training and do I need to do it, I did an entire live about it. Okay, so if you want that link, post sleep training live below and I'll give you the recorded video of that one. The general point is just that when it comes to sleep training, there's a lot of misconceptions in our minds about what it is. And the reason is because a lot of the methods that are out there are really harsh methods. So we think of sleep training and we think of babies screaming and crying, parents forcing babies to get a really good night of sleep, and that's not really what sleep training is. It's not what sleep training has to be. So this is all about gentle methods today. And we're not even talking about the other ones, but in general, sleep training is using a method, a method with proven steps that we know works to help a baby learn to self-settle. Self-settle means to fall asleep without help, okay? A gentle method, what that really means is a very gradual method, okay? So, for example, a Ferber method, you lay a baby in bed and they cry until eventually they fall asleep. It means that they are used to having 100% help to sleep, so maybe a baby that's been rocked to sleep before, breastfed to sleep before, and now they just get placed in their bed and they just have to figure it out on their own. They just cry and eventually they fall asleep on their own. They figure out how to self-settle. The method works very quickly, but of course it's not my favorite method because it's a lot for a baby to just kind of have to learn how to fall asleep independently when they've never had to do that before, right? So a gradual method, so gentle method just means gradual, and I'll go into my method and how it works, but it's like saying, I'm not just gonna let you cry, maybe. Maybe it's like, I'm gonna give you some help while you're learning this skill, okay? When I think of parental help, okay, one of the examples I use is doing the dishes, okay? So I can actually go and I can do the dishes and it's gonna take a few minutes and it's not a big deal, right? My kids are a bit older. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Now, when I want them to do the dishes, okay, it takes long, it's a bit of a process, so it's kind of to me, I compare sleep training just like any other habit forming situation of my kids are little. If I want them to do the dishes, I'm probably not gonna get them to just figure it out on their own, right? You're all right, here you go, there's the dishwasher, have at it, right? I'm probably going to be standing there, I'm going to be helping them. It's going to take super long because that's how it is when we're learning a skill, and they're going to, maybe put all the, dishes in the wrong cupboards, and that's what I would expect. So that's what I compare it to. Helping our kids while they learn how to self-settle. That's what gentle sleep training is. Okay, why would we do this? Okay, this is, I think, a huge one. Can't they just, figure it out? Will they ever just figure it out? So the reason why we do sleep training or use a self-settling method is because of the way that babies sleep, okay? So as humans, we all wake up in the night. The difference between an adult and a baby is that our sleep cycles are much longer. So our light points in our sleep, as adults, we have it much less frequently. Babies have very frequent light points in their sleep. That's why it can be common for babies to wake up every, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. It's just because that's when they hit their light points in their sleep. And then why would we use a self-settling method? The main reason is because at some point in time, some way or another, we all need to learn how to self-settle, meaning we all need to be able to fall asleep independently without help, right? I do not get rocked to sleep every night before bed. I probably did at one point in time, but at one point in time, some way or another, whichever method, was used or not used, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a legitimate method. It could have just been My parents, like this was a long time ago. They're like, yeah, we just let you cry. They're like, solve that problem. Like, yeah, like that was a while ago. That was how parenting was done sometimes in my day. So at some point in time, there was some sort of a change. If your family started to rock, some families don't start to rock. We talk about prevention of kind of some of these habits as well, but going from that habit to stopping the rocking. Okay, so that's why we do it, is just because that's how babies' sleep works, is that they wake up in their sleep if they don't know how to put themselves back to sleep. Okay, and just to one more point, clarify that what we want babies to do, we want them to wake up in their sleep. That's normal. They're going to do that. We want them to look around the room and then to go back to sleep, right? Like that's what the goal is when it comes to, any sleep training, is just that we don't necessarily need to be there to pick them up and feed them and rock them and do all the things when they learn that skill of self-settling. Feel free to post any questions below. Post the name of, or not the name of your baby, post the age of your baby and, what your sleep is like below so that I can see it. And then the next question is like, how do we go about this, right? So that's kind of the main thing. How do we go about it? Today we're talking about gentle methods. So there's 2 gentle methods I'll be going over, and then I will go over my methods because obviously I like the ones that I use best. So gentle methods, the 2 main ones that are kind of out there and on the market. One is the pick up, put down method, and the other is called responsive settling. We'll go into those, and then we'll spend probably more time in my method because I like it a lot. Okay, so let me know if you're here. Okay, so one thing before we even go into how to do the methods, okay, is all about setting yourself up for success, okay? I talk to a lot of families, okay, a lot of families about sleep. And I can also tell you that I have a lot of families that come and start working with me, and they've already tried, some sort of, sleep training or whatever it is, but that we actually have to set ourselves up for success. You can use any sleep training method to allow a little one to self-settle, but if there's certain factors that are, that are hindering the process, or it's kind of like, I'll explain kind of what some of the specific, examples are, it's not going to work, okay? So for one example is darkness, okay? So I tell all families, it's really great, those suction cup, blackout curtains off of Amazon, for $30, like those are really helpful, because if we have our children in like really bright lights, it's really hard for them to fall asleep. So some of those sort of things, setting ourselves up for success, especially when they're learning a new skill. We want it to be like optimal situation, right? It's kind of, if we're teaching our kids how to do the dishes, we want to have a set drawer for the forks and the knives, right? We don't want to be like, well, yeah, like sometimes the forks go in here and then sometimes they go in there, and you know what I mean? It's like, we want, and I know it's hard to imagine with babies, but it's like when we have bright lights shining in our baby's face, and then we put them to bed, it's like we're telling them it's daytime while we're putting them in their crib, telling them it's nighttime at the same time, right? We need to make sure that we're not giving mixed signals. Okay, the next thing that hinders babies from being able to do, sleep training really well, putting them on an age-appropriate schedule. I had a family come to me one time. They were doing cry it out, so just like full-blown, lay baby in bed, closed door, baby cries for 2 hours. Okay, so they were doing cry it out method. They've been doing it for more than a week. This method, because it's so incredibly harsh, it should be like 2 days tops and you're done. You know what I mean? I don't recommend it because I don't think it's fair to babies. But this is the family that came to me, and when I looked at their sleep situation, the reason why it didn't work was because their baby wasn't getting enough daytime sleep. Okay, so it's like, yeah, like your baby should still be on a 2-nap schedule instead of a 1-nap schedule. And that was the main reason why it didn't work. So it's like, you can have even the most harsh method, a method that will work for sure, like quickly every time, but it's not going to work if it's not done under the right circumstances. Another thing is like sleep props or things like that, soothers. So I had a family that came to me. The dad was a pediatrician, so safe to say he understands some of the sleep training, methods. They did a Ferber method, maybe modified, a little bit more check-ins, something like that. But it was a 4-month-old baby, and I was like, yeah, like you can't do a Ferber method with a 4-month-old baby having a soother because the baby's just going to spit out the soother, right? So it's like, there are certain things that if we have them in place, it doesn't matter what method you use, it will never work. A 4 to 8 month old baby who cannot take the soother and put it back in their mouth, you can't do sleep training with a baby that age. If you want more about soothers, post soother live below. I can hook you up with the soother live. I did an entire one. A 9-month-old or older, it's a little bit different. They're able to take that soother, put it back into their mouth. That's a skill that they kind of need to be able to establish in order to do sleep training with a soother, okay? And then the last one of setting ourselves up for successful sleep training is not following through, okay? You can use any single method. You can have your baby, crying for an hour in a Ferber method, and then if you pick up and you rock your baby to sleep, they will not learn how to self-settle, okay? This is something I hear frequently. And then people will be like, but my baby was crying so long. And I'm like, unfortunately, that is the method you chose, right? My recommendation is to choose a gradual method or a gentle method. So then you don't have to feel like you need to give in, okay? But just so you know, when it comes to any sleep training method, if you do not follow through, you're not going to see the results, okay? Even if you're doing 90% of the method, you let your baby cry for an hour, they're about to fall asleep, but you're so, overwhelmed because they've been crying, and then you pick them up, they're not going to learn to self-settle, okay? So this is where it's like, my recommendation, use a different method. Okay, so let's get into the pick up, put down. Okay, post below if you've tried the pick up, put down and how it went, and I can comment on it for you. Okay, pick up, put down is exactly as it sounds, okay? You put your baby in bed, your baby doesn't know how to self-settle, so they're going to cry. You pick up your baby and you hold them, okay? In this method, you would not be rocking, you would just be holding them. They might stop crying or they might keep crying. It's that challenge of that's kind of a challenge of the method. But the idea is once they stop crying, you would put them back down. They're probably going to start crying again. You pick them up, you'd snuggle them until they stop crying, and then you would put them down. Another challenge with the method is obviously just that when to put them down is tough if they're always crying, and that they can start to fall asleep while in your arms. You have to make sure that you're like, no, okay, no, putting them down. And then they're going to full-blown wake up and cry. So it is, to an extent, like a wait it out. Let me see. So some of the notes that I wrote, that there's still definitely crying involved, right? If you went from rocking your baby to sleep before, and then you suddenly stop that and you're not doing any rocking whatsoever, your baby is still learning how to fall asleep 100% on their own, right? So it's kind of like if my kids are doing the dishes, I'm standing there maybe kind of cheering them on, woohoo! But I'm not really telling them which covers any of the things go, and they still have to figure it out on their own. Okay, so this is much more a way that we can comfort our kids, but I have another method I'll go through later that I like better. Okay, and another thing that's not my favorite about pick up, put down method is just physically picking up and putting down our kids. The method I use does involve some picking up or putting down, depending on how we go about it. But just physically, when you have a drowsy baby and you're putting them into bed, it often wakes them up. It makes the process take really long, and it's also physically demanding, which can be a challenge. But I also always tell families that all right, but 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks, physically demanding, never have to do it again. You got to look at that final goal. So that's a little bit about the pick up, put down method. Okay, the next method I'm going to talk about is called responsive settling. So put below if you have heard of that or anything like that. I don't think I've seen any comments below, so I'm not sure if my comments are not working or if I just have a bit of a quiet crowd. Okay, hopefully a quiet crowd. If not, I'll answer comments later. Okay, responsive settling. Okay, so this is reduce the amount of help given to sleep. Okay, like we said, our goal has to be to go from whatever it is you're doing, rocking, breastfeeding to sleep, whatever it is, to a baby learning how to fall asleep on their own. So this would be for example, the best way I can kind of explain this method is just by example. If you have a baby and this is what it takes them to fall asleep, you're doing a massive bounce on an exercise ball while you're breastfeeding while you're singing, you would gradually kind of reduce this by, kind of like reducing things one at a time. Instead of doing like a large bounce on an exercise ball, you're going to go to a gentle bounce on an exercise ball, while you're singing and feeding. Then maybe you're going to cut out the singing. You're just doing a gentle bounce on an exercise ball while you're also feeding your baby to sleep. Then you're going to go from, feeding and bouncing to just feeding to sleep. Okay, so this is kind of an example of the responsive settling method. The method I use has some of this element of like we're gradually reducing things. So I do like some of this method. The main issue with responsive settling that I find is that the goal has to be for a baby to self-settle. Okay, so I also all the time hear families go, we had the baby would only fall asleep when I breastfed the baby to sleep. So I decided I'm not going to breastfeed to sleep anymore, and now we rock our baby to sleep. Okay? Same idea with this one. We went from bouncing and singing and nursing to sleep, and now I pat my baby's bum to sleep. Okay? So it's like, that's kind of good because maybe it's less physical. Maybe we're not, doing all this craziness. Maybe it's a little bit easier. But if your baby is still totally hooked on, bum pats to sleep, your baby's still going to wake up as frequently in the night as they did when they required the rocking, the bouncing, and the singing. So it's kind of a good thing. It got you somewhere. It was helpful, but the goal has to be to stop the help to sleep. So this is where I find that this method gets a little bit tricky just because it doesn't quite solve for the entire problem. Yeah. Okay, let's go into my method, okay? I do a mixture of methods. I don't even have a fancy name for it, so I'm just going to call it my methods for now. One thing we do is we make age-appropriate goals, okay? So if you have a 4 to 6 month old baby, an age-appropriate goal could be 2 wake-ups or 1 wake-up, okay? 6 months is kind of the golden mark where a baby can start to sleep through the night. So if I have a family with a 6 month old baby, say we start and the baby is 6 months, that means 3 weeks through the program, we'll have a baby that's, almost 7 months. I'm like, okay, your baby could be sleeping through the night a month from now, We make age-appropriate goals, okay? So that's step 1. This to me is something I'm very passionate about because there's not a ton of education about baby sleep out there. And when I tell people that, your 7-month-old could be sleeping through the nights and we're not going to cut out feeds, we're not going to do a method that involves tons of screaming and crying, we're just going to gradually, change the habits that are in place. I feel like families are just so oh my gosh, that sounds like a dream. It's not a dream. It's just habits. We're just changing the habits, and I feel like people give me a lot of backlash of it's not normal for babies to sleep through the night at this age. It's actually the opposite. It's normal for babies to sleep through through the night at this age, but what hinders it is our habits. And unfortunately, as a culture, we don't have the information on habits that everyone, if only we knew, for all of our babies to be sleeping really well through the night, okay? So this is why we make age-appropriate goals so that people are well aware of what it could be, And the same goes for the opposite. Sometimes, I have families that have 4-month-old babies. They're like, yeah, I just want them to completely sleep through the night. I'm like, yeah, your baby needs to eat. That's normal, Or sometimes I work with families that the baby legitimately does not eat all day long, I've had, 1-year-olds that work with me. Definitely old enough to sleep through the night if you have a healthy 1-year-old. But if you have a 1-year-old that legitimately eats nothing all day long, then I'm like, well, yeah, your baby probably does need to wake in the night. And then our goal would be something along the lines of, every 3 hours, which would be biologically normal, as opposed to just being literally awake all night. Something like that. I've worked with families and we've made age-appropriate goals, okay? So step 1, we make age-appropriate goals, okay? People always tell me, how can they do that? I'm like, you just wait. You'll see it, okay? I see this all the time. We reach our goals, okay? Step 2, I like to put boundaries in place, okay? And we like to help babies fall asleep, right? So it's like saying, hey, little one, I know that your entire life I have helped you until you are 100% asleep, okay? If we're using a Ferber method, it's like saying, I'm not going to help you till you're asleep at all, and I'm just going to let you figure it out, and I'm not going to even be in the room for it, okay? Doing pick up, put down, I said, is kind of like saying, you're going to have to figure it out 100% on your own, but I'm going to snuggle you while you're doing it, okay? My method is like, I've helped you until you're 100% your entire life. Now I'm going to help you until you're 90% asleep. And then we're going to gradually, move that boundary, right? So that's, to me, with any parenting strategy, I'm a huge fan of boundaries because it's healthy. It's healthy for everyone. My kids tell me things all the time that are not necessarily what's best for them. They tell me that they need candy. They tell me that they need, to watch TV all day. They tell me all these things. But they don't actually need candy, and they don't actually need TV all day. I'm the grown-up, and I'm in charge, and I know what they need best, right? So we put healthy boundaries in place. They have screen time, and we put boundaries in place about how much screen time it is, okay? I'm also just going to note, because I hear a lot of families saying, like, it's my fault. I never should have started rocking. It's not your fault. It's just a habit that's formed, and that's okay, because as parents, habits form and we can change them, and no big deal. When my kids are sick, our screen time gets to be like astronomical, like all day, and then after that, they're like, hey mom, can we watch TV all day? I'm like, no. You know what I mean? And they're like, but we did all yesterday. I'm like, well, you guys were sick, and now today you're better, and now we're going to go back to our normal screen time limits, So this method is kind of like taking our boundaries, putting them in place. So, for example, if our kids had, screen time all day when they were sick, they're starting to get better, we're like, okay, well, now we're going to shorten the amount of screen time you have, And if our goal is, 1 hour a day, something like that, you gradually reduce it day by day until maybe after a week, you only have 1 hour a day of screen time. Something like that. But we're talking about baby sleep. So let's see. So the way I go about it is that we take whatever it is you're doing, okay? So if you rock your baby to sleep, then you take rocking. If you're breastfeeding your baby to sleep, you take breastfeeding. If you have a soother with a 4 to 8 month old baby, you have to ditch it and use something else, okay? So people really don't like to ditch the soother. We can comfort our babies in other ways than a soother, but if you have a 4 to 8 month old baby, you gotta ditch the soother if you want them to have a really great night of sleep, or you have to wait until they're 9 months of age. Like I said, did a live on soothers if you're interested in that one. But instead of rocking your baby until they're 100% asleep, we're gonna only rock them till they're 90% asleep, okay? Instead of breastfeeding your baby until she's 100% asleep, we're gonna breastfeed until she's 90% asleep, okay? That's how we start the process. We put a boundary in place, okay? So, when you're a breastfeeding family, what does that look like? You can co-sleep. If you're a co-sleeping family, if you're not, you don't have to. But it's just an example. This is why it's not necessarily a pick up, put down method, but it really just depends on kind of what your setup is, right? If you're going into the crib, if you're a crib sleeping family already and you want to keep the crib, then it does look pick up, put down-ish because you have to pick up and put down. But if you're a co-sleeping family, you can just have your baby fall asleep next to you like you always do. But let's say you're breastfeeding family, you would breastfeed the baby until they're very, very sleepy. You'd unlatch, they're going to cry, right? You put your breast back in mouth, breastfeed them until they're super, super sleepy. You'd unlatch, they're going to cry again. You do it again and again and again, right? The first night takes super long to do, okay? But eventually, you're going to breastfeed them, you're going to unlatch, they're going to go, and they're going to fall asleep because they're so tired at this point in the time, right? And so the same with rocking, you would do the same thing, rock until sleepy. The way the method starts is that you start off with a 90% mark, but the only way to actually, kind of like I said with the gradual settling, responsive settling method, is that eventually you have to stop rocking, right? So it's like, if you're rocking until 90%, you do that for a time, and then you reduce, right? You reduce the rocking. You can't just, one main factor that I notice that people do is they get into the habit of rocking until 90%. Sleep may improve like a little bit, but your sleep is not going to be, your sleep problems are not going to be corrected until the habit is fully broken, okay? So you do need to go from 90% all the way through the percentages until you're not rocking your baby anymore and your baby learns the process. I say it takes about a 3-week process. That's why I've decided to do a 3 weeks to better sleep program. Lots of sleep consultants offer 2 weeks because, 2 weeks is enough for a more harsh method. It takes, about 3 weeks for a more gentle method. So I always say it's not a quick fix. It's not easy. It's a lot of work, okay? I legitimately only want to work with families that want to put a lot of work into it. When I was a new sleep consultant, I offered like free services, things like that. And what I noticed is that a lot of people didn't, they weren't really ready to put in a lot of work. They kind of just wanted like an easy solution. It's not. It's a lot of work. But I always tell families, but 3 weeks from now, you could be done. You could be no longer rocking at all. 3 weeks from now. If you're a breastfeeding family, it's not that you have to stop breastfeeding. It's that your babies will start to sleep through the night when you don't breastfeed them to sleep anymore. Because they're not waking up because they're hungry. They're waking up because the sucking helps them fall asleep. So if you stop breastfeeding to sleep, they'll stop waking up in the night. So that's why we don't have to cut out feeds, because it's not about the feeding. You can feed your baby in the night, when they wake up. I recommend it. If you cut out feeds, kids get really upset because they're so used to that and it's so comforting and so warm and there's nothing wrong with it, right? But it's the breastfeeding to sleep that I'm like, we got to stop that. We got to change that one, right? So the families that I want to work with are families that are like willing to invest in sleep consulting, at a reasonable price, knowing that we can see success at the end without using harsh sleep training methods, okay? Those are the families that I want to work with, okay? We use a science-based approach, right? People say all the time to me, like, oh, it's not realistic. It actually is. It's realistic. I can show you exactly how babies can sleep, and I can show you a graph of baby sleep, and I can show you exactly why your baby is waking up. And it has nothing to do with hunger. It's to do with their circadian rhythm. I can show you that, and I teach families about this all the time in my program. And that, this program, the 3 weeks to better sleep program, it works, right? It works as long as it's done correctly. And this is why it's such an extensive program. This is why I do daily check-ins with my clients, weekly calls. We do a full 2-hour review before we start, where I can go into depth with the method, with how it looks every day, and even when we're going through the process, we can change up the method. We can tweak it to how it works for your family, because I actually want the families that work with me to have a really high success rate. And I do have a really high success rate. So that's really exciting. But yeah, it's work. That's what I tell people. Not a quick fix. It's a lot of work, but you could be done 3 weeks from now. All right. Let's see what else I have to say about it. I welcome anyone who's, tried it on their own and it hasn't worked out. If you feel like that's you and you've really just been trying to figure it out. Like I see families all the time that are working so hard at doing something, but they haven't kind of seen the end result because they're doing so much work, but it's not in the right area, right? So this is why I'm like, I welcome you to come join the program, to have, someone who's an expert in this and has done it a lot, to give you the help that you need to see the success that you want. There's a comment at the bottom, I'm going to read it. With risking to sleep, when you do 90% until almost asleep, what if they wake up when putting in the crib and start crying? Do you rock again till 90%? Yeah, every time you pick them up and rock them to 90%. Yeah, if they're ever crying, you always pick them up and you rock them till 90% if that's your 90% day, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and just to note that like families who are reaching out for support are seeing a lot of success. I can give you references. I can give you Vina, Dennis, Olga, Robin, Jelana. Like these are just a few of the families I've worked with in the last, few months. And their babies, they could tell you my baby was waking up every hour and a half, every 2 hours, and they're sleeping through the night right now. Yeah, and then on Wednesday this week, I'm going to do an interview with Valerie about the program and what it looked like and how it went for her. And I think that's really exciting, and it's a really great way for families to see, like, this is exactly what it looks like to work with Courtney. Okay? Yeah, and this is why I created the 3 Weeks to Better Sleep program, because the main reasons that babies are not sleeping through the night is just because they don't know how to self-settle. And the main reason why, parents aren't allowing their babies to self-settle, is because they don't know how to go about it without using super harsh methods. And they don't want to use harsh methods. And that's fine because we don't need to use harsh methods. So, so this is where I'm like, if you want to do a call, post below, sleep strategy call. I still have availability tomorrow. Okay, so if you want to have a sleep strategy call tomorrow, we can talk. We can talk about what it's going to take for your little one to reach, their age-appropriate sleep goals. 6 months and older could be sleeping through the night. So post below if that's you. I want to help you, and I'm really excited for the families that want to have a really great night of sleep. One more comment. Would you recommend starting this when the 4-month sleep regression starts? So I definitely recommend starting this at 4 months of age. At 4 months of age, there doesn't need to be a sleep regression. I'm going to go into it a little bit more when we do our live on regressions. But the reason why a regression happens is because this is when the habits that we have formed start to interfere with our baby's sleep because our baby's development has grown out of the habits that we have in place. It's a little bit confusing. I'll go into it more. So yes, I recommend starting a gentle sleep training method at 4 months of age so that you prevent sleep from regressing, if that's helpful. If there's any other comments, feel free to post them. I'm just going to answer any comments. But, I think other than that, I've got the main points. So post below if you want to do a free sleep strategy call, you want to talk about how to improve sleep, and you want to talk about, working with me and getting a really great night of sleep 3 weeks in time. Any other comments? Maybe not. All right, well, I hope you have a really wonderful Monday, and I hope to hear from some of you soon. Let me know your thoughts below. Okay,